The last video I posted about T1 was when they got, I think it was 3-0 or 3-1 in the playoffs, and I titled that video T1 is officially doomed. And I got a bunch of people saying how stupid I am and how terrible I am and how wrong I am for saying this stuff. Well, the reality is, I was right, and you guys are just a bunch of T1 fanboys living in denial. You're unable to actually see reality, and the reality is T1 just got utterly smoked 3-1 by HLE. When I said T1 is doomed, I didn't mean they would go farther in playoffs, I didn't mean they would do this or that. I meant that they had no chance of winning the split, and subsequently they have no chance of doing anything at Worlds in my opinion, if they do qualify for Worlds, which is honestly not a guarantee at this point. HLE was just a better team today, and it was pretty obvious that they were just on another level. I think a lot of it had to do with the drafts. I think a lot of it had to do with execution and decision making as a team. Specifically in the games, I want to say it was 2 and 4, Owner was put on Nidalee and looked completely invisible. And quite honestly, he looked kind of invisible the entire series. Peanut completely gapped the crap out of Owner, and it wasn't even close. Similarly, Zeka gapped the crap out of Faker, and this has kind of been an entirely down year for Faker, not just a down split or a down series. He has not been himself in 2024, at least to the standard that we're used to. Another thing, I don't know who's doing the drafting for T1 or who's making those decisions in Champ Select, but they put Gumayusi on Ziggs 4 games in a row, and this is a mistake Cloud9 made that really doomed them in playoffs, was just picking the same crap over and over. When you have a player as insanely good as Gumayusi on the ADC role, and you stick him on Ziggs 4 games in a row, like, you're just asking to lose. You're not taking advantage of your players' strengths and how good your players are. Gumayusi at his peak is one of the best ADCs in the world, and you stick him on a non-ADC 4 games in a row. Yes, Ziggs is a fantastic champion, maybe 1 or 2 games, but when it's not working, you gotta change something up. You can't just pick the same crap over and over every single game and expect to win. That's not exactly how it works. But Zeka played really, really well. T1 gave him Smolder, like every single game for the most part. His Yone also looked really good. Zeka was for sure player of the series for me. Peanut also played insanely well. And it was clear that HLE was just better. It was a similar case when, did T1 play Gen G or did they play HLE last time as well? T1 this entire split just hasn't been themselves, hasn't played up to the level that we're used to. And it was pretty clear that they just weren't on the same level as HLE as a team. So moving forward, tomorrow HLE is going to play Gen G in the finals. Obviously, we're all expecting Gen G to win that. But just in general, the top 2 of Gen G HLE are just kind of on another level as every other team. Before, I thought DK was on that same level. But after T1, did T1 3-0 or 3-1 DK? I think that HLE and Gen G are kind of like S tier in LCK, and T1 and DK are maybe like A, maybe even B tier compared to those teams. And I don't think it's really close. When you're picking Nidalee, when you're picking Gnar, when you're picking Ziggs 4 games in a row and expecting different results, it's just kind of doomed. T1 just didn't really have much to go for today. They didn't really have much control of the map. They didn't really have great decision making. Like, I think it was in game 3 when they had just gotten Baron. Maybe it was in game 1. They had just gotten Baron, and they had all 5 members alive, and instead of just recalling and taking the win, they rush across the map to contest Dragon and try to stop HLE from trading the Dragon, and they end up getting completely wiped and throw the game for it. It's things like this that really stand out as huge mistakes from T1. And even in the game they won in Game 2, HLE should have won that game. The only reason T1 won was because Faker had a complete hero play on the Tristana. Other than that, HLE won that game, or was ahead in that game for pretty much the entire time. So overall, T1 just isn't that team anymore. They're not the same team that won Worlds last year. They're not the same team even that won EWC a couple months ago. They're much weaker in every single phase of the game. Individually, team play, drafting, decision making, communication, it seems like every single phase of the game they just seem to be a little bit deteriorated, a little bit tired, and I think that this is one of those times when you have to point to, okay, this roster stayed together a year after they were supposed to break up. And it was the perfect time to split up the roster. They just won Worlds. It was supposed to be the last year with this roster, and they greeted for an extra year, and they're kind of reaping the consequences of that now. So I think that that's another big reason that they're not being as successful is because they're just kind of tired. It's been a lot of repetition and a lot of expectation when you come off winning Worlds and then stick with the same roster. You're kind of expected to do the same thing, and obviously that's not being the case. So overall, I think that T1 is just not really going to do a whole lot this year. Obviously, they're out of LCK playoffs now, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they fail to qualify for Worlds. I wouldn't be surprised if their mental booms at this point. But even if they do qualify for Worlds, I really don't see them doing much. I don't think they can compete with top tier LCK. And I think that honestly, I might even take G2 and TL over them at this point. So it's definitely been a rough kind of rough year for T1 and Faker especially. But in just every single phase of the game, T1 just looks significantly weaker than they have before. And it's unfortunate. I'm a fan of T1. I'm a fan of Faker for sure. But all good things must come to an end. So we'll see what T1 does in the off season in 2020 before 2025 starts. See if they make any roster changes, or if they keep the core of like Faker Zeus, because I do think that Zeus is probably the best player on this team at this point. I think Oner has slumped quite a bit. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the champions that he's being put on. Same thing with Gumayusi. If he's not performing well on 4 games of Ziggs, maybe try putting the best ADC in the world on an ADC champion. So over just every single phase of the game, T1 just doesn't look great right now. It's unfortunate, but that just seems to be the case. And now I want to fast forward a little bit and see, is this kind of the time that Faker decides to call it? I know he has an extension through whatever year with T1, but he's been playing a long time, and this is the first year in a while that this team has been relatively unsuccessful. And he individually also had a very off year. Just did not look himself. Spring split was pretty rough for him. Summer split was a little better, but he's just not at that level that we're used to seeing him at. Obviously, he still has the potential to be great, and he still is great. He's the GOAT for a reason. I just think that maybe he's tired. Maybe he just needs some time to reboot, refresh. Maybe it would even be beneficial if T1 didn't make Worlds, so Faker can have just a little bit of time, a little bit of rest. So whatever happens with T1 in the off season, if they go to Worlds, if they don't go to Worlds, it's just going to be interesting to see where they go in the future, with the roster, with the players, Faker individually, with coaching staffs. This roster's been through a ton of iterations, and Faker has always obviously been the mainstay the entire time. But just imagine a world where Faker isn't on T1 or isn't even playing in pro. What would that be like? And what kind of success would T1 have in that case? All interesting questions to consider, interesting theoreticals to think about. But for now, this is the T1 we have, and they got smoked by HLE this morning in a best of 5, and it wasn't really close. Thanks for watching. See you next time.